welcome to Front Lines. We'll take a moment here right at the start to allow people to do their shares and cross posts, and we'll get started. Welcome to our viewers from across the United States and Canada, throughout the Middle East, Australia, as well as Europe, and of course from Armenia and Artsakh. We are at a very peculiar and indeed surreal time in Armenian history, and we're living those moments. We have been living those moments since the beginning of the war, September 7th, 2020. And as the days, weeks, and months progress, the dire nature of the outcome only becomes more apparent. Without an extended introduction so that we can get into the matters involving the border issues, Sunic, and related issues with our guest today, I'll pass it on to Garo to make a brief introduction so we can jump right into the issues today.
Thank you, Karnik. Good morning, fellow Armenians in Armenia and Artsakh, and good day around the globe. Our guest is a frequent guest, unfortunately a frequent guest, because there's frequently things that have to be discussed with none other than the human rights defender of the Republic of Armenia, our friend and yours, Ombudsman Armaan Թաթոյանի. Armaan, Armaan. Karnik, go for it.
Yeah. If we can, Arman, if we can begin right away with your last visit to the border regions and the issue regarding Sevlij and the issues that are on the table right now regarding the incursion of Azerbaijani forces inside 3.5 kilometers of the Armenian border. And the issues that you've observed and your mission has observed, and the most recent events, if you can bring our guests up to speed.
Yes, thank you very much for inviting me to the front lines. Karnik Jan, Karo Jan, I'm very glad to see you. And thank you for choosing this very important topic related to the protection of the rights of our border residents in Sunic and Gեղarkունիք, and of course issues related to the limitation of and the process related to the borders of Armenia. As you know, and as all our compatriots know, on May 12 and May 13, Azerbaijani military personnel evoking a blatantly fake map have breached the territorial integrity of Armenia and made an illegal incursion inside the borders of Armenia, specifically towards the region of, as Karnik said, Sevlij or Black Lake, and subsequently towards the civilian communities. The same goes for the Gեղարքունիք province. And here we have also, again, a referral by Azerbaijani armed forces to illegal maps and fake maps, and again illegal incursion inside the territory of Armenia towards the civilian communities, which is very important. Right after this news and after this, I would say, very illegal criminal action of Azerbaijani military servicemen, we started fact-finding mission and conducted fact-finding activities. And I would just very quickly turn to the results of the fact-finding activities, especially related to the violation and breaches of the border residents' rights. So according to our fact-finding mission, Azerbaijani armed servicemen, which is, by the way, the same both for Gեղարքունիք and Sunic, threatened when they appeared in the territory of Armenia. They threatened with guns shepherds who are border residents of Armenia with weapons while illegally being present in the sovereign territory of Armenia. And I would now give you some details, specifically in the region falling between the Blake Lake or Sevlij and Verishen village of Goris community in Syunik province. Azerbaijani armed servicemen approached the shepherd of the village who was grazing the animals on the dawn of May 12th, threatened him, and with a show of weapons demanded that he leaves the barn and the pasture. And our fact-finding activities, of the human rights defender, demonstrated that the barn of the shepherd of the village Verishen is located in the area of the pasture permanently used by the residents of, by the way, another village, Akner village. There are two villages above this region and up to the Blake Lake, and the number of the other villages in the area falling between Blake Lake and Verishen civilian community. The Blake Lake is located in the, of course, apparently in the territory of Armenia. In the area of the barns in the pastures of Verin Shorja village, this is already a Vartenis community of Gեղarkունիք province, around 10 Azerbaijani armed servicemen approached the shepherd of the Verin Shorja village on May 12th and threatened him with a show of weapons, speaking to him also in the Armenian language, by the way. On the same day, when 6 shepherds from Vartenis and Ayirk, from Vartenis community, which is basically the city, but considered the community uniting also several villages. So the Vartenis community and Ayirk village grazed their large and small cattle around the water basin near the same pasture located in the territory of Armenia. And several dozens of Azerbaijani armed servicemen approached them, threatened again them with a show of weapons, and gave them again several minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, to leave. Otherwise, they threatened to take them as captives even, or to kill. Similarly, on May 13, about 50 Azerbaijani servicemen, this is already the next day, servicemen threatened the shepherd of Verin Shorja village with a show of weapons, again with the same illegal criminal demand. And the specific or the peculiarity with Gեղarkունիք province is that here we have several parts, let's say, where Azerbaijani soldiers we can observe their illegal incursion inside the territory of Armenia. So this is the part related to the more to the Verin Shorja village, to the pastures of Verin Shorja village, and there is another part related to which is next to the Kut village, right in the direct vicinity of the Kut village. So on May 12th, again, they approached the shepherd from Kut village. This is already Geramasar community, who went by the shepherd went to the barn in his pasture, located adjacent to the village, and discovered around 50, as he could observe, and as he told us, about 50 Azerbaijani armed servicemen. Again, the same. They gave him a couple of minutes, and they said that this is our territory. Right now, you have to leave, and this is the demand. This was the demand from their side. So during the visit, it became very apparent that the pastures are allocated to the people on the basis of rent by the legal documents of local authorities. By the way, I have to say that all these pastures belong to people, at least almost all of them belong to people based on legal documentation. This is right, that they rented them and they rent them from communities. Therefore, the issue is related also to the illegal deprivation of their legally obtained rights. And according to the shepherds, they no longer have access to the pastures. And there are several other shepherds already who left already these pastures. And the issue is that the fact that the Azerbaijani armed servicemen are physically present in the pastures, and that legally belong to the people, and in some cases it is impossible to use the pastures since they fall under Azerbaijani line of fire or the target. Because there is certain territory, we posted even a special photo illustrating presence of Azerbaijani, the exact location of Azerbaijani military, and the location of cattle barn. And if shepherds approach or try to approach their barns, then Azerbaijani military or their servicemen open fire. They may open fire in the air, or they may open fire towards the barn, but it does not matter. That this is the existence the problem is that we have these illegal actions of Azerbaijani military, and at the same time, yes, yeah.
Forgive the interruption, Arman. Look, I know your time is limited. I want you to finish your thought, but I have 3 areas I want to take you. And consider this, you know, we keep hearing about delimitation, demarcation. Karnik will probably, put the question better. But we hear from you repeatedly, security zone, security zone, security zone, and how the process of delimitation and demarcation will take years, sometimes decades. In as much as, there is much to say, and many who have said many things about the acting government, if you will. I know you're not into the political aspect of it, but politics and war always affect human rights. So from the human rights perspective, with this delimitation, demarcation, security zone that you keep talking about, and this so-called new document that's not signed, may be signed, may not be signed, I know your efforts and your team's efforts. I know you guys went to the hospital on May 20th or 21st, the fist fights that lasted about 30 minutes between soldiers on both sides who had automatic machine guns, but somehow, people are trying to avoid firing the first shot. But, I can't imagine people living in these villages. I can imagine, you can imagine it because you went there. So there's the bulk subject matter that I want us to cover. Karnik, forgive the interruption, and forgive the interruption as well, Arman, yourself as well. Go ahead.
Yes, well, this is a very important question. The most important one nowadays related to the protection of rights of our border residents. Itself delimitation, only delimitation, without creating a security zone, according to the concept that we are now developing, what we are finalizing, and we will publish it very soon. We are now waiting for some specific information from communities, from bordering communities. But I'm more than confident that only demarcation or delimitation, this will entail and will bring new violations, new breaches of rights of our border residents. This process is very dangerous in terms of it contains dangers in terms of new tensions. And I'm sure that it will not contribute to the peace and security in the region, the new demarcation, and delimitation and demarcation. Karajan, there are, according to international standards, certain rules, specific rules exist and have been adopted by OSCE, by United Nations, by other international organizations that concern delimitation and demarcation. And why my interest here is based on international standards, because itself delimitation, proper delimitation, is a guarantee for human rights. But when considering the processes of delimitation and demarcation of our borders, we have also to consider certain very important factors that do exist and are very specific for our region. And if you allow, I will just very quickly try to list them. First of all, we have to take into, and by the way, all of them are mandatory, and all of these factors, and we cannot ignore any of them. And the first thing is that highest authorities of Azerbaijan, political authorities, they not only did not stop, but also deepened after the war, and they continue deepening the policy of Armenophobia and even the policy of animosity amounting to fascism. And my words are based on evidence. These are not just assessments or evaluations without grounds, but they are groundless assessments. They're based on concrete evidence. We have published several reports, and this is about genocidal policy. The second, which is very important, based on the same principle, the president of Azerbaijan constantly speaks in the language of threats about our country and the entire population. And he is proud to have a generation grown up with feelings of hatred and animosity. We have published these words are documented. These are public messages of the president of Azerbaijan. The Azerbaijani authorities deliberately continue to cause mental suffering to the families of Armenian captives and missing persons and violate the rights of captives, but not only publishing the real number of captives and prisoners of war that we have in Azerbaijan, but constantly denying, artificially delaying the process of their return and release and denying this process. Another very important thing is that the real danger of reoccurrence of Azerbaijani atrocities during the war against Armenian civilians and servicemen has not been eliminated, I think, while no one has been held responsible for what occurred. The Azerbaijani armed servicemen are present illegally in the sovereign territory of Armenia, and because of their presence, rights of constitutionally recognized and internationally recognized rights are violated. And the problem is that, again, this very much creates problems for the peace and security in the region. In the vicinity of villages of Gեղարքունիք and Shyunik provinces, Azerbaijani armed servicemen continue to grossly violate rights of border residents of Armenia. Here, I mean threatening Armenian citizens, as I said, by displaying their weapons to them. People are deprived of access to their lands, pastures, also periodic shootings. Near the borders of Armenia, we have to take into account. Then finally, gross violations of rights and provocations are recorded on the roads between communities, connecting communities of the Shyunik province. You know, and well, our compatriots, I think they know what I'm speaking about. This is the presence of Azerbaijani armed personnel, military servicemen on the roads that are connecting our civilian communities. And we had already several cases of provocation, not several, I mean many of them, periodically that are being registered, throwing stones towards the Armenian car, then dragging and beating by Azerbaijani military servicemen, an Armenian shepherd in the village, next to village Aravus of Teh community. And itself, their presence on the roads is done, I think, to intimidate our people, because of this presence on the roads, people even refrain to travel from this to use these roads. That is why I think these factors bring me to an idea that a security zone must be created. It means the removal. They should be removed. Azerbaijani armed forces, their flags and signs from those locations, from those places where they are now located. You know, I will now try to explain also in another way, in a different way. There has been never delimitation or demarcation process between Armenia and Azerbaijan, right? As processes between two sovereign states. Since there has been no delimitation or demarcation, consequently, we have to build these concepts or the kind of border determination processes based on human rights and putting a person, a human being, in the center. Because according to delimitation and demarcation mandatory principles, among them, we have also human rights protection and rule of law and democracy. So consequently, the criterion or the, let's say, indicator of delimitation demarcation process is very simple: whether normal life of people was undermined, was destroyed or not. And we can see now that normal life of our people, of our border residents, is totally destroyed. That is why before any delimitation or demarcation processes, we have to have this security zone at least 10 kilometers. There should be no Azerbaijanis, and it should not be done, it cannot be done at the expense of the territory of Armenia, let's say, because we have civilian communities there, and it should be done based on the principle that I have just told, to restore at least at the minimum level rights of our border residents, and because delimitation or demarcation, it may take dozens of years, you know, if not longer.
Arman, if I may, I want to take you back a little bit, not in time, but in perspective, because I think that, and maybe follow me along this line and let me know your thoughts. I think that there's a much bigger game going on in this particular instance. We have spoken a number of times regarding the speed with which Azerbaijan and Aliyev have been trying to push issues post the November 9th statement. And we have spoken, in fact, the idea of the security zone in some ways slows that process, the speed by which this the process is being pushed by the Azerbaijanis. There's been a lot of discussion, as Gado had mentioned, about an agreement that may have been signed, may not have been signed, exists or may not exist, and discussions regarding those. But one thing that is really clear is that Aliyev, just a couple, 36 hours ago, started claiming that he's pushing for a peace treaty, right? That Armenia and Azerbaijan need a peace treaty, and that Azerbaijan is ready to recognize the territorial integrity of Armenia, and if Armenia would recognize the territorial integrity of Azerbaijan. I have a couple of issues with this, and I guess I'm coming at it from the perspective of an international lawyer here, and I want to get your thoughts on this. It is really possible that in the game of border delimitation, demarcation, in this game and in these agreements that may or may not be signed, we lose something even bigger in this game. Because if there is a recognition, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Arman, if there's a recognition by Armenia of the borders of Azerbaijan, that is in of itself a recognition that Artsakh lies inside those borders, and therefore it really speaks strongly to the narrative that Aliyev has been trying to argue from the beginning from the November 9th statement. I'm afraid that what we're walking into, or actually running into, with respect to the border demarcation delimitation issue, if it's not slowed down the way that you propose through commissions, through the border security issue, the security zone issue, I think we're walking into a much bigger problem, and I say this, mindful of the fact that that so much has been done, which quite frankly has shocked many people, many observers, not only in Armenia but outside Armenia, regarding Armenia's handling of its own sovereignty issues and its own territorial integrity issues. For example, not having border positions protected around Black Lake, not have the response to border incursions being, if anything, timid is perhaps a polite way to say it. But isn't there a bigger risk here, Arman, like that by this process moving ahead so quickly, and if there are agreements to be made on border delimitations, demarcation lines, that we could be walking into a much bigger problem of, and I hate to say it, inadvertently agreeing, or intentionally, I don't know, I'm not a politician, to recognizing that Artsakh is on the eastern side of that borderline, and therefore we recognize the borders of Azerbaijan, and now we have peace, but what we've lost is Artsakh completely. Is that not a risk of moving so quickly in this process?
Garnik, this is very important part, and this is one of the, let's say, most risky parts. And when it comes to the protection of our compatriots' rights who live in Artsakh. And of course, the limitation process ideally could mean what you have just told. But since this issue has also some political components, that is why usually in my statements I have been refraining from giving some assessments to the political components. But when it comes to human rights protection, I have to say that when we have this existence of this still genocidal policy, the policy of ethnic cleansing, the spreading the state-sponsored hate speech, state-sponsored hatred and Armenophobia, protection of our compatriots' rights who live in Artsakh is of great importance. This is very important. This is an issue of their existence. And of course, the purpose of Azerbaijani authorities as this war showed, and generally this is their general, let's say, policy, is to exterminate Armenians who live in Artsakh, and of course, generally all Armenians, but at least Armenians in this context, Armenians who live in Artsakh. That is why I cannot say here maybe too much given my mandate, but I can highlight one very important thing. We must never forget, and we cannot do this to forget about the rights of our compatriots who live in Artsakh. This is very important. Otherwise, if they are locked up, let's say, in the territory of Azerbaijan, I think this will be, it is very obvious that this will be the end of Armenians, their free existence, their gross breaches of all rights of our compatriots, and very importantly, right to life, right to dignity, security, and health, which is very important. And this is the most risky part. That is why I agree with you, yes, that the process is very speedy. And also another problem is that the process has not involved specialists who could at least work on the ground, who could give their assessment based on the needs on the ground and on the real needs, and also taking account the tragic results of this war and the humanitarian disaster that Azerbaijani authorities during the war intentionally created in Artsakh, I think, by their bombings and by targeting civilian communities. That is why I agree with you in terms of when it comes to your assessments on this matter, and of course I share these concerns as well.
Arman, if the CSTO is saying we're monitoring the situation, and if Russia, I think it was Russia's deputy foreign minister, is saying that we will provide assistance to Armenia and Azerbaijan if both countries ask for it. Well, we know that Azerbaijan is not going to ask for it. Azerbaijan started escalating and disregarding any norms immediately after Mr. Lavrov paid a visit to Baku. Now, I know your mandate is not a political mandate, but I want to come back. If you are the human rights defender of Armenia and your mandate is to be the eyes and ears to make sure that the citizens of Armenia's civil rights and human rights are protected, first and foremost, as it relates to the government that governs the people. But of course, then beyond that, but then on the political sphere where you do not cross, shouldn't the government of Armenia be the guarantor of the civil and human rights of its citizens? And I'm specifically in this instance referring to what's going on at the border, what's going on in terms of discourse with Moscow, what's going on in terms of talk about setting up commissions and of Azerbaijan and Armenia to try and figure out this latest 6-point document. But in all of this, you know, on the 6 months after the offensive onto Artsakh and thousands of casualties, civilian mostly unnecessary. There's no such thing as a necessary casualty, but civilian mostly casualties, infrastructure, cultural monuments and whatnot. Are we really now, 6 months later, going to allow that dark chapter of our history just 6 months ago to be repeated in Sյունիք, Գեղարքունիք, and in all those villages that many of us have traveled on our way to Artsakh, and we turn and make a sharp left, and on the right there's this man-made little sandy hills, and the village right next to Barur Sevak's home, and all the other villages are supposed to be coming under threat. And what is going on? Who holds the government accountable when it comes to human and civil rights violations of its citizens. I hate to put it that way, but it is the only way that I could describe it.
Arjan, as you very rightly mentioned, there is too much uncertainty. So this was the context of your question, as I see. But let me first say that, of course, I do not have any political mandate, so I cannot give any thoughts on this matter. But what I can say that this is a fact. Many rights of our border residents, and not only border residents, by the way, of all our citizens even, they remain grossly violated. Many rights are under real danger because of this so-called border, or, I don't know, determination, border process, or call whatever you want. But this is an illegal process which resulted in violation, gross violation of the rights of all our citizens, entire population of Armenia. And of course, we can say here also, join here, Artsakh, our compatriots who live in Artsakh, because there are also some problems. Another, and as you very rightly said, by the way, the purpose of Azerbaijan, what do comprise their genocidal policy? This is not only physical extermination of people, their torture, etc., but destruction of Armenian cultural heritage, religious heritage, which is also very important, and they do comprise these components of genocidal policy, and deeply rooted, by the way. Now, when it comes to here to Armenia, the problem is that there is a huge amount of uncertainty, ambiguity. People do not know what will happen tomorrow or the day after tomorrow or today. And you know, I think this is why I'm here. I think that the government should change its policy in terms of providing proper information to the society, to the public, to be as predictable as it is possible. Because what is the problem? If the government stays passive, then eventually the government becomes the victim of its own passiveness. Why? What I mean here, I will try to explain in at least with one or two sentences. You know, if the government is silent on many issues, since this issue is very, very crucial and it interests every person who lives in Armenia, of course, other Armenians as well who live outside of this country, this vacuum is filled with too much wrong information, fake news, you know, and it creates a later tension, eventually in the end, tension in the society, and also it also results in increasing authority, so to say, of unofficial sources of information, because people then try to get information from different sources. Also, I have to say that Azerbaijani authorities play their role as well, because it is in their interests to keep this society in tension. That is why it is very important that the government gives proper information to the society, to the public, takes the initiative, which is very important, takes the initiative from one information center. For example, I will bring just one example. If you go to if you analyze the information sphere of Armenia, you will see that many information is provided by local administrations, by heads of provinces, etc. But this is wrong, because the government, the information should be very central. There should be central policy. For example, the Ministry of Defense, I don't know, or some government central authority should provide periodically proper information. Other than that, well, because of absence of this kind of single policy, journalists or people have to refer to all officials that they know, and because of this, the information provision to the public becomes very decentralized, and because of this, people get, let's say, non-credible information, which is at the end, it is again one of the factors that contributes to the tension here. That is why, for example, as the villages you mentioned, again, there are so many rumors, there are so many uncertainty, there is so many uncertainty in our society that that is a component contributing to tension. And I agree with you with the context of your question that the government must take the initiative and provide always proper information periodically about all these sensitive issues, so that this nation, our people, the entire population knows what is happening, because this issue concerns everyone.
And I think, Arman Can, to follow up on that point, I think we've seen a really unfortunate trend repeatedly, particularly, I mean, now it's since the last few weeks of the war up until this period, where the Ministry of Defense says something, and then 24 hours later, the opposite happens to be true. There's nothing going on, and of course there is something going on, and then, like you said, it leaves this vacuum. And unfortunately, what happens, not only do people turn to unofficial sources, but sometimes they even turn to the, and I will use the word, the enemy sources, not the opponent's sources, but the enemy sources for information. So your point on the value of providing accurate and truthful information on an ongoing basis is really well taken, because that vacuum is sometimes filled not only by rumors, but unfortunately, it's sometimes filled by the enemy state. And we've seen that on a number of occasions. You wanted to comment on that?
Well, yes, I think that I consider generally that here in this field, the government is failing its role, and this is a failed policy of providing proper information to the public. Because of this, there is another problematic, let's say, I would say phenomenon. The government does not provide proper information, or certain authorities does not provide proper information to the society. Then the public starts discussing issues based on referring to different other unofficial sources. And later, some officials, because of the failure of the government policy in the information area, start accusing citizens in conducting or in contributing to the tension, in spreading the information, in bringing tension in our society. I have to say that the government is #1 responsible actor here to prevent all of these negative phenomena and to put the process under the control. And even then, the government the government will secure the situation, the atmosphere here. At least will keep the process under the control, and of course in a reasonable sense, which will better protect them, which will provide our people with their rights, which will guarantee their right to be informed about these processes, which are very vital, and they concern everyone. If something wrong is happening right now, for example, in the bordering village or in 2-3 bordering villages of Syuniko or Gեղարքունիք, and the government is trying to hide this information, it will eventually be published somehow. Because now means of connections are so developed that the information will come out again, anyway will come out. That is why it's better for the government to take the initiative and to control the process from the very outset.
And I want to follow up with that if I can, Garo, because I know you want to get a question in, but I do want to follow up on this, because two little bits of pieces of information circulated very recently, which I think it really kind of hones in on another element of human rights, and that is, the right to vote, essentially, and the right to participate in your government. Obviously, in a parliamentary system, you're not electing a president, right? You're electing a legislative body, a bloc, who then has a leader, and the reason I bring that up is because in the current system, every time that there's some issue to come up regarding discussions with the other side, discussions in Moscow, discussions at the border, everything, and I understand to the degree that it needs to be private from the public. I understand that. There was a recent issue from government sources, other ministries within the government, where they were complaining about not having information regarding the very issues that are within their ambit. And the reason I bring up the parliamentary versus presidential system is that the people have elected a government, not necessarily only an individual. And my question is, regardless of the fact that issues need to be kept out of the public sphere, are you confident that within the government and its various branches of experts and ministries, that information, and perhaps you either can or can't, and if you can't, I understand, but I want to ask the question regardless. Does the government itself, its own bureaucrats, its own technocrats, its own experts within the government know what is actually happening in these private or confidential discussions? Because it seems to be from the outside that when people from the ministries say, speak out and say they don't know about this or they didn't know about this, that begs the question, perhaps they don't. And I want to ask you that question in terms of, it's one thing for information not to be public, but is information being shared within the government in a way that protects essentially the right of individuals to have their government speak for them as opposed to individuals speak for them? Because they've elected a government and a parliamentary system. And I hate to kind of drag on to another point, but it's related. Recently, in fact, one of our guests, previous guest, politician, Mr. Marukyan, had mentioned, and perhaps it's because I'm a lawyer and I pay too close attention to words. He referred to the elections coming up in June, if there are elections in June. He used the word if. I don't know whether I'm looking too deeply into that, but I would say if somebody's a candidate and like he is in the election, I think that he would be very careful in using the words if or when. I think the differences are monumental. So the two questions, if I could just really quickly sum up, is there enough intra-governmental information being passed around so that the various institutions of the government can weigh in on all these private discussions, one? And number two, is there a risk that there will not be elections?
I will start from the question related to possibility of elections. Well, I cannot predict, I don't know, but I'm getting prepared for monitoring, for impartial monitoring of elections, because we have this mandate, and political protection of electoral rights, political rights is within my mandate. So we have created a working group here, and this working group will be monitoring. I had already a discussion with the chief of Central Electoral Commission, I have to say, and we agreed on several things, and the details will be discussed later and of cooperation, between our two institutions. So now when it comes to the issue of information flow within the government, honestly, I see this issue, I see this problem, but the main problem, the major problem, relates to the communication of the government to the ability or to their capacities with the public. This is the most important thing. Here, I mean, not only general public by giving statements, etc., or by press releases, but also their communication with journalists. So, for example, what here happens? When they receive journalistic queries, let's say, on many issues, usually government authorities, they do not answer immediately, but they delay the answer. Anyway, they know that they have to respond. But they delay the response, let's say, and they respond within 1 month, 2 months, or I don't know, 15 days. But it is already, the practice shows that usually it is too late when they already provide the response, because the vacuum has been already filled up with fake news. This is also very important, and that is why I think the most important thing for the government is to establish proper communication with the public at large, general public, and with journalists, which is very important, because then journalists, of course, keep their contacts also, they provide the information to the public, and by this keep us informed generally the public about the problems or processes that are going around. So again, just to sum up, let me reiterate that especially recently, what we could observe, this is nothing but failure of the government authorities, their policies in terms of their communication, proper communication with the public and with journalistic, let's say, with journalists. And this creates another this is a factor that contributes very largely to the tension. And the government has to take the initiative, especially in these very, very sensitive areas and the questions that concern delimitation or demarcation of our borders, protection of rights of our border residents.
Let me ask you this. When the government resigned and a special election date was set, June 20th, which incidentally is 4 weeks from now, 4 weeks in the United States, this being Sunday night. So it's really 3 Sundays later or 4 Sundays later max, I suppose. It's 28 days. Because of the situation and because of what Carnegie alluded to earlier, that at least one political party chairman made the remark during their party congress, if you will. Do the people of the Republic of Armenia have a right to have duly elected representatives, not those who were duly elected, who resigned and are just gatekeepers or holding the place warm, either for themselves again, if the people vote for them, or for others, or some combination of one or the other. Is there anything that you are aware of that mandates when a government resigns that by a date certain there needs to be special election to put people in place who are elected anew? If you know, I don't know if there is such a thing.
I don't have this, let's say, well, I have some information, but I think if I publicly express it, it may sign also some political nature. But generally, I understand you, and we have many people who ask similar question.
Because why resign if you're going to then continue to defer a new elections? You might as well stay in place. If that
exactly. We have the important. We have to have a very important criteria. Human rights and democracy should be at the core of all processes, and democratic processes should be the basis for the development of our country, especially in this very difficult situation. And if we abrupt them, if we create problems in the continuous process of this democratic, let's say, elections or whatsoever, then we may experience more problems, let's say, in the future. That is why I think this should be as reference point to have always all the processes within democratic, let's say, development. And because this is, at least in the difficult situation of our country, this is the only guarantee to save the process and to put human rights in the center for the key to solve the problems that our country faces now.
And Armaan, I think that you've done a tremendous job and a very unique job, I have to say, among human rights ombudsmen throughout the world, obviously, particularly through Europe, but in that national security as a human right. I mean, we are literally dealing with that issue, which I doubt very highly very many human rights ombudsmen deal with on a regular basis. And you've highlighted this point during the war, immediately after the war, and it's no surprise to me. I don't know if you would care to comment on that, but from what our sources indicate, because of the openness that you've shown with the people, and actually having these missions directly to the hotspots where these issues are most pressing, your offices and your approval ratings seem to becoming, are skyrocketing. In the last report that I saw, yet again, there were increases in your office's approval ratings, which is not the case, generally speaking, with throughout the Republic of Armenia and other institutions at all. In fact, the trend seems to be going the other way in all other institutions. My question is this, having said that, you were the first really to highlight as a human right the national security crisis on individual human beings. This is a very interesting approach because it hasn't really been done because the issue had never been there really in this particular instance. And if you can speak, and every day that we hear the news, we hear the reports, we see foreign powers weighing in. The discussion regarding uncertainty of information, if we backtrack 6 months, this is the same type of discussion we were having regarding 9 months regarding Artsakh, right? The idea of uncertainty of information, what's happening, what's not happening, border issues, individual security issues. And it seems to me that, I mean, it's a very surreal reality. I guess that might be an oxymoron there, but the point is that it's a very surreal instance right now where we're having this conversation with foreign enemy troops on our territory. We're having this conversation. Very few states would be in the mood to be having any conversations in that particular instance, but that is exactly what we're doing, having conversations and negotiations. And I understand the path to peace is an important one. However, I don't think that the path of war is yet finished. That said, what are the pressing national security related human rights issues that you see? I know it's a short amount of time we have left, that we should be looking at, we should be weighing in on as diasporan Armenians, as Armenians in Armenia and Armenians in Artsakh. What should we be focused on in the next, literally in the next few days, in the next week or so? What are the pressing issues that are concerning you the most?
The most, I would say, the concerning issue is the issue of the security and peace in our country, right to life, the issue of existence of our people, not only, by the way, Armenia, but also, of course, protection of rights of our compatriots in Artsakh. You see, you refer to the uncertainty of information. Many people ask a question now, are we going to lose Artsakh? What will happen? The rights, because if the delimitation or demarcation process is in a way that is supposed to be classically, it means that there will be already no sense of speaking of the rights of our compatriots who live in Artsakh, right to self-determination, for example, right to life, etc. But we have another very pressing issue. These are very vital rights, I want to highlight, related to the right to life, right to physical security, integrity of our people, not only physical integrity, but psychological integrity. Because of this border delimited, so-called determination or border processes, immediately after the war, the whole life of our people, psychological integrity, has been totally destroyed. And we always live in stress. We don't know what will happen tomorrow, and which is very important. And this is very a matter of huge concern for me as the human rights defender of this country, because this process generally affects human rights protection in the area. Because of this process, because of the situation that exists now, the political situation in the country is very tense. Because of this, human rights, normal human rights, are kind of forgotten. Even sometimes I feel that every human right is just abandoned. We do not remember about right to social security. We do not remember about rights of children who live in child rights institutions, about rights of persons with disabilities, that they face discrimination and stigma. We don't speak that much already about rights of people who spend their time because they are sentenced to certain amounts of years and they are in prisons, etc. So you see, this process generally pushed us back, I think, and now all other vital human rights, they are under the shadow, let's say, of these security issues. That is why, and it is, on one hand, it is understandable, but on the other hand, it generally is degrading the country. And so that is why for me, I think the most important thing, of course, is this currently is the security, human rights issues related to the security, the concept that human rights do complement security and democracy and all the way around. But here, having in the center the government that is providing proper information to the public, because this is also a respect of the government that they must show towards the public in issues related to this security problems. And as the human rights defender, of course, I will continue my activities. We are now summarizing the concept related to the creation of the security zone. Well, you know, I'm not a romantic, of course, and when it comes to these issues, and I'm too naive, and I understand that the security zone maybe will not be created tomorrow, but at least we have to show the legal grounds, you know, the evidence that create the absolute need for this security zone. That is why even I publicly referred, I called upon our powerful diaspora to help the human rights defender, to assist the human rights defender in terms of bringing up these problems, these facts, human rights gross violations and breaches to the attention of the world. That because the purpose of Azerbaijan now is to show to the world that everything is perfect. They are located on their territories. Their life is normal, as if we are living in we live in heaven, and there is no need for any concern. But we have to show to the world, to the outside world, that the situation is totally different here, and we experience gross violations and human rights breaches. And several months ago, even we had the severe war crimes, which are, by the way, the danger, as I even stated publicly, is not eliminated. So this is it, and we will continue, of course, to work towards this direction. And thank you for these very important questions. I think the topic is very specific, and we have to bring it, to open it for details to our public, to our compatriots.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tatoyan. It is really an honor to have you back with us frequently like this, to give us the details from the ground, from the missions that you are running directly to the hotspots. And I know that there are other grounds that we will still need to cover, and I know that your time is limited. But I did want to say, if I can have you comment just 60 seconds, if you don't mind, on the current state of issues regarding the POWs, if you don't mind.
Well, yes, the issue remains the same. The Azerbaijani authorities artificially delay the process. They present everyone as terrorists, and by this, they very openly abuse all legal proceedings. They connect everything with November 9 statement. And but then later, of course, because of these manipulations, they got even lost in all their reasonings. Now they say that everyone is a terrorist. Unfortunately, they do not release the real number of prisoners of war and civilian captives that they have, and they also manipulate with the situation. You know, the thing is that I consider that we have still an armed conflict. The armed conflict is not closed. Yes, there are no hostilities, which is true. But the armed conflict itself, there is no peace agreement. So it means that under the international humanitarian law, these people, whoever is under their control, is considered a prisoner of war or a captive by status. So consequently, they are under the protection of international humanitarian law, and they should be returned to Armenia. Of course, the Azerbaijani authorities are politicizing the problem, and they also ignore international assessments, international statements. Recently, European Parliament has made a statement, then some other agencies. But by not returning Armenian prisoners of war, they, of course, they cause mental suffering to our people, to the families of prisoners of war, and to also missing people. But by this, they are also deepening the animosity and Armenophobia. And I cannot imagine how they speak about peace when they do not return release and return Armenian prisoners of war. This is what are also bringing to the attention of international community. Recently, there was an initiative from international community already to start a peace building process. But and they chose also the human rights institution as one of the main interlocutors. But my response is very simple here. There should be certain preconditions to start peace building process. When you have prisoners of war illegally being held in Azerbaijan, all the animosity, etc., how they can speak, we can speak about peace. That is why I'm saying that the peace is the highest value for us, but we have to be very careful in terms of fake, because we have been always facing fake peace building from the Azerbaijani authorities. This is it, and they are politicizing the issue, of course, apparently of prisoners of war, and but we have to continue working, of course, because every minute, every second is very important that our compatriots spend. We have to protect their rights and to save them, let's say, from the captivity, because all of us, we can imagine their situation in Azerbaijan, and also very importantly, the situation of, and the health status and the psychological status of their families here in Armenia.
Arman, thank you so much for always putting principle in your practice, because it has made all the difference in giving perspective, proper perspective to the issues that we're seeing today, and making sense of that. And with that, I want to pass it over to Garo to make his closing remarks, because I know, Arman, you have a meeting that you are now a few minutes late for, as it is.
I want to thank you, Arman, on behalf of countless Armenians globally, and of course in the homeland, for your continuing, relentless, and unsparing efforts. We did not get around to talking about your trip to Moscow. We did not get around to talking about your upcoming trips, of which Carnegie and I are aware, in the days and weeks ahead, and your ongoing efforts on all fronts. I wanted to say in closing, I wanted to quote you actually, which you actually referred to. You wrote, "Peace is the highest value for us, but we must not allow Azerbaijani authorities to muddle us with fake peace process." And in understanding what you meant by that, it was obvious to me the following: that the POW issue, which I'm glad Karnik brought up, because if he hadn't, I was going to say, look, we spent an hour speaking about what's going on in the border regions, delimitation and demarcation, and the rights of the people to have a peaceful life in their own homes and villages. And we did not talk about POWs, because that's exactly what is being intentionally done. While we have countless prisoners of war and civilian captives sitting there, we now are on the verge of suffering additional such captives. When we watch videotapes of people pushing Armenian servicemen, people threatening Armenian shepherds, people infringing about the Armenian villagers' rights and the children in those villages, the skies are not bright today, and I am ashamed that while people are talking about who is best to run this country, I sure hope that these elections take place and are not postponed, because the way things are going, we will not have a country to run. So when people are talking about who should be sitting on the chair of whatever ministry, who should be running the government, let's be mindful of the fact that the enemy is not at the gates. The enemy is inside the gates. It's in our territory, and it's been there. May 13, it was May 13 when the acting prime minister said that he described the situation as near critical and calling the Azerbaijan's actions intolerable. Intolerable means intolerable. Near critical is near critical. But it's 10 days later. 10 days later, and we still don't have answers. We still have foreign troops on Armenian sovereign lands. This is outrageous. The two words that come to mind are defiance and exploitation. defiance by Azerbaijan of a peace treaty or a ceasefire rather entered into on November 9th, 6.5 months ago practically. Defiance, total defiance, disregard, not coming to a meeting, not paying attention to what's going on, talking the talk and saying whatever it wants to say, changing churches in Artsakh, calling them Albanian, destroying and causing an evaporation of a church and gets away with it. You name it, it's happening. You name it, it's happening. And the exploitation, I am sad to say, and I'm not anti-Russia or pro-America, I'm none of those things, okay? Russia is an important ally. You'd have to be an idiot not to understand Russia's importance to Armenia. But there's an exploitation going on here. Whatever happened to, hey, if you come into Armenian territory, Russia will come to your defense? What happened to that? Were the borders not defined when that agreement was entered into? Clearly they were defined. How could this happen? And what is going on in our parliament, in our ministries, that they would allow this to happen? And forgive me, where is my opposition? Exactly where are these opposition parties and what are they doing to force the issue today? I'm not hearing anybody saying this is what has to happen. Why are the people not on the streets today? They were on the streets after the war. Well, you know what? The enemy just swallowed up a piece of Armenian heritage and homeland, most of Artsakh, and is about to swallow up Armenia proper, important parts of Armenia proper. These are not fun times. And 28 days from now, I really hope that in the next 28 days, the priority is to secure the border, to secure the safety of the citizens, and at the same time, march forward, have elections, form a government, whether it's a unified government or a majority government, I don't care. Form a government and enter into some concrete agreements with some concrete steps and tangible results. We will be here to support in every which way we can from the diaspora, far and near. Thank you, Arman. I'll be talking to you. Karnik, sorry, I vented too long. Thank you.
Thank you. If I may, towards
yes,
I will, of course, I understand your concerns and I very much appreciate these discussions because they are also very important platform to provide information, proper information to our compatriots, to the diaspora, to our people, so that they are aware. And this is also for awareness raising purposes. These discussions are very important. And as I have also to, at the end of this discussion, I have to highlight that we will continue, of course, and we do continue serving in an apolitical, within our apolitical mandate, non-political mandate, being always neutral, which keeps us strong, which keeps us more credible in our steps, and of course, to keep strong relations with our international partners, to bring to their attention all the gross violations and not to allow Azerbaijan to spread the fake news to the international community and to rewrite the history of our people at the expense of the rights of our people, which is, I think, very important for us for the moment, one of the important tasks.
Thank you.
Arman Can, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hold firm.
Thank you.